thank you for your time this weekend, and I'd like to introduce you now for his final speech, our party chairman, Mr. Nick Griffin, MEP. Thank you.
Thank you all. Right, 7 minutes past 5, see what we can do. As you know, this is the last British National Party conference before the 2014 Euro elections. For us, the big one. Means we've got 6-7 months of a great deal of work. We've still got a lot of money to raise. We've got a big war chest for the North West. The East Midlands has raised all its basic money. Some other regions are sitting on quite a bit of money. Other regions have got really very little in their pot. We need more. This is an opportunity for us to put out something like 24 million election addresses. It's a huge reach. It's a huge throw of literature. It'll bring in new people, new recruits, new blood, new energy, but only if we can afford to do it. I'll tell you this, we are not going into debt this time around. We're not going to spend 3 years crawling out of a hole like we have this time around. We're going to spend the money we've got up to the nail, but nothing more than that. If you haven't got the money in your region, then you're condemned to putting those leaflets out by hand for the next 50 years instead of the postman doing it. Please get out there and start raising money. It's really important. Every bit as important is organisation. As Adam was saying earlier on, the impact of having 2 or 3 or 4 people out on a stall in a town centre on a Saturday morning for an hour or so. It's not just the people who take the leaflets, it's the people who see you there, the people who hear that you were there. It has a huge impact. If we were the other parties where the media treat us fairly, we wouldn't need to. As you know, we're different. We can't rely on the media, we have to do it ourselves. And it's not meetings like this. This meeting reaches people out there through the internet. That does help, it's important. But in electoral terms, you've got to be on the streets in your own patch. Week after week after week, not the same place, but different places. It's what makes it fun, it's what makes it easy, it's what makes it effective. So we need to build the organisation so we've got more people out there, and we need to work to build our support. Now, that is partly about the message we put out in these leaflets. And there's going to be millions of them going out in the North West alone. Now, we know part of what the message is going to be. We discussed it yesterday. It's about how I particularly, and because I was with the British National Party, was able to help really seriously do something to stop that appalling proposed war in Syria. It's going to be a significant part of the message, as well as the long-standing message that we've always been against the European Union, as well as the long-standing message that we speak up for the silent majority on the question of immigration. When we're talking about what's the purpose of voting British National Party instead of UKIP, we will be pointing out that I go to committee meetings. There's 50, 60 speeches of mine, which we can put just one link to, see what Nick Griffin does in Parliament here, and people will go on that and see, yep, I actually speak out on their behalf. We'll be doing all of these things, and such as the outreach of literature we're going to have, it's going to have a really serious effect. Here in the North West, it really is all to win. But we can't just rely on those leaflets and the post office. We've got to be out there doing it ourselves. The other fact we're going to be putting across in a big style in the North West particularly, but it's relevant to people in the south of England, in the Midlands, in South Wales, in Yorkshire, in parts of Scotland. We're going to be talking about fracking. Now, at the last conference this time last year, you'll probably remember we had a debate and we decided that the party was against fracking, and that hasn't been questioned this time around, so that absolutely stands. But I know there are some people who've said, well, we understand that, but you look at what's happened in America, where gas fracking and what they call tight oil, something similar with oil, has actually absolutely revolutionised America's gas and oil supply, and perhaps surely we can't afford not to do the same thing. And the message we're going to be putting across to people in the North West is, yes, we can afford not to go down that disastrous road, because when you actually look at the small print, the more you look, the worse it gets. Just down the road in Blackpool, Cordrea, one of the main companies drilling in Britain, which has never yet made any money. It's only financed because sucker investors keep on pouring money into it. That's what pays the directors. That's what pays the dividends. It's not what they're producing. It's just people's hope that this is some new, great, wonderful answer to a definite energy problem. It's not. They're not actually producing anything. The well they had just down the road at Priest Hall which definitely caused an earthquake. It wasn't an earthquake which is going to bring the Blackpool Tower crashing down. Everybody knows that, so people aren't too worried. They should be worried for this reason. Did you know that well is now capped, sealed and broken? Because the earthquake broke that well. Cordrela have only drilled 4 test boreholes in Britain. 2 of them have failed. One of them, they dropped some kind of big spanner down it and fouled it up. They've had to cap it. And the other one had an earthquake and it broke. And they say, don't worry, because the steel casing and the concrete, it's absolutely sound. Nothing can go wrong with it. It's very clear what goes wrong with it. Once you've done that gas fracking and you've got some of the gas out, you can't get it all out. Some of it's left. And the pressure, once they seal the well off, gradually builds up. And at some stage in the next 100 years, because steel rusts and concrete rots, it is, according to the real experts, guaranteed that every single fracked well will fail in terms of its casing. And at that stage, you've got pressure from deep down in the earth carrying poisonous fracking liquids and, in some cases, naturally occurring poisons, such as radioactivity, from deep down in the ground where it does no harm, under pressure, up to where the borehole is, to where the casing's rotted, and to where it comes into contact with our groundwater. So there's plenty of evidence, a mountain of evidence from the United States of America that fracking actually has immediate health effects, really serious health effects in terms of pollution of the water, animals dying, in terms of pollution of the air, and all sorts of health problems for the people living near them. That's a simple fact. And long term, every well will fail. If the Victorians had had fracking, our water supply all over huge chunks of Britain would now be desperately poisoned and compromised. And the companies that made the money would be long gone, and we'd be having to clear it up. The taxpayer would have to be clearing it up. If you can, clear up polluted groundwater. Where do you start? It's a truly horrific problem. On top of that, just how much it produces has been massively overrated. People don't understand that the average fracked gas well only produces a really serious amount of gas for 1 year. The depletion rate is enormous. So within 2 years, basically, it's producing very little. Tight oil wells, 2 years down the line, are producing 10, 15 barrels of oil each per day. That's all. It's no serious source of energy whatsoever because the depletion rate is so great. The only reason the Americans are able to keep up at present for a few years a very large amount of gas and tight oil is the fact they're drilling thousands upon thousands upon thousands of wells every single year. Britain doesn't even have the capacity to do it, and we don't have the space. The Midwest of America is enormous, it's vast. They've got the space. The gas fields of England, of the northwest of England, basically under the Forest of Bowland, it's farmland, it's under villages. Yes, there's gas under the centre of Manchester. But you can't go drilling holes every few hundred yards and moving them time and time and time again. It's worked for America, it won't work for Britain. Actually, has it worked for America? Here's another real killer point, that yes, America is producing vast amounts of gas at present, thanks to fracking. Most of the companies producing it are making a loss on every drop of gas or tight oil they got out of the ground because they so flooded the market with it that prices have crashed through the floor. And it's a very difficult, expensive technology, drilling 6, 7, 8,000 feet down into the ground, then drilling sideways, half a mile, time and time and time again, then pumping explosive charges of millions of gallons of water down into the ground. It's hugely expensive. And as a result, most of those companies are losing money. And America has had a huge surge in what the energy it's producing. And the energy is very cheap. It's helped big American industry, the big corporations. But it's at a loss. The companies aren't financed by the money they make from this miracle technology. They're financed by sucker investors and by fund managers of pension funds pouring money into the next big thing. 5, 6 years ago, the banks and the experts were saying, you know what? These mortgages in the United States, all diced and sliced and packaged up, they're a fantastic investment, fantastic return on your investment, subprime mortgages. Remember that one? And where it went? Gas fracking is the subprime of the energy world. And yet because it's short-term profitable, not for the companies doing it so much as the banks and the sharks in there getting people's money into it. Because of that, it's being pushed ahead in Britain, and it will be a disaster. The very best you could say for it is this, that if there comes a time when, because our masters and the political elite haven't built the new generation of safe nuclear power stations they should build, because they haven't invested in things such as deep wave electricity technology, because they haven't invested in real serious energy, one day it may be that actually we have no choice but to go in some parts of Britain for short-term gas fracking. But if that's the case, let's wait until we absolutely have to have it, when energy is so sky high around the world in cost terms. Let's wait until then, and not stand by and encourage the likes of Cameron or Miliband to do it on their watch, when any money that is coming in the taxes and so on, you know what they'll do with it. They'll blow it on mass immigration, on multiculturalism, on handouts for the rest of the world, on wicked foreign wars. It won't go to benefit the people of this country. So you put all those things together, and next year we will be standing up as the sensible, not the green Luddite resistance to anything technological. We'll be saying we need ultra-safe, modern thorium power. We need systems of electricity such as deep wave power, which are permanent, safe, and which Britain can sell to the world once we develop those technologies, building real industries again, real jobs for real people. That's what we're standing for, and no fracking, not in the northwest of England, not in South Wales, not in eastern England, not in Scotland. No fracking in our country on our watch. That's a promise. Now, in the course of the run-up to the campaign, I want, if I can possibly find the time, to get over to the United States for a few days to actually see firsthand gas fracking, to get film I can bring back so we can put it on our website, talking to local communities and showing what it does, in particular how it devastates, how it industrialises the landscape. I want to get over and do that, so this brings me on to the question of travelling. I'm due at present next week to be in Azerbaijan, election monitoring. I may, within the next few months, be doing an election monitoring operation somewhere in Africa. I do election monitoring so I can come back to Britain and compare and contrast the election systems in what are supposed to be third world or second world republics with the election system in Britain, the mother of all parliaments, and say openly and honestly, I've seen elections in Russia and in Ukraine and places like that, and their elections, sadly, are 10 times more democratic than the sorry farce that we have here in Britain. So I go there for those purposes, and I go there to see how, when a new democracy like Russia invents its system from scratch, how they actually come up with things better than what we've got. And I'm working now with some of my nationalist colleagues. Hopefully we're also going to have election monitoring in Britain by independent election monitors, and then we'll compare and contrast the electoral system in Papua New Guinea or whatever with that pertaining in Britain. And I'll tell you what, 9 times out of 10 we'll be able to show very, very clearly that the system in this country is really rotten past the point of any return. It's an appalling disaster of an attack on democracy and an attack on the rights of voters. So that's why I do those things. It's not just to go and see those countries. It's got a real solid political purpose to put across to people in this country. I'm going, as you know, over to Poland. We've already said why, about the climate change conference and helping to show there's real opposition to that particular elite scam, and to be there with our Polish comrades on their National Day as a way of showing that nationalism isn't about hatred and opposing other people. It's just about us running our affairs in our country and them having the freedom and the right to do the same in their country. And that way we and the peoples of the world can get along just fine. So I'm going there for that reason. I'll probably, before the year's out, I'll be over in Belarus. Now, I can't always say, I know there's been a bit of, well, what's he doing? Why isn't he here? He's over there this week and over there the last week. Sometimes it's not clear why I'm there. It wasn't clear why I was in Syria. Now you know why I was in Syria. So don't expect always to be told precisely why I'm somewhere, because sometimes it simply isn't suitable, it's not helpful for us to go advertising what we're doing, who we're working with, what we're trying to do. So necessarily you've got to trust me that I don't go on these trips just for fun, because it isn't fun, actually. It really isn't fun. Do you know it took a full 24 hours travelling to get back from Damascus last time? We had to go from Damascus to Beirut, from Beirut to Moscow, from Moscow to Zurich, Zurich to Brussels, Brussels to Manchester, Manchester home. That isn't a holiday. I'm not doing it for the good of my health or for fun. I do it because it needs doing. It's part of the work, not part of the pleasure. And in any case, I'm still here. I'm still available. As you know, I've got a tour coming up. We've got a fundraising tour for the European elections. Providing I'm not called to further things in Syria. And if I am, I'm afraid sorry, you have to have your fundraiser without me. Because that's simply unavoidable if something like that crops up. But generally, providing that's not the case, I will be at each one of those fundraisers and I will help you not just raise funds, but also helpfully involve and enthuse the new people that are coming into this party everywhere where people are out there working. Anywhere where people are sitting around thinking, it used to be good in the old days, no one new is coming in. Anywhere where people are out there giving out leaflets, talking to people in the high street, selling papers, getting involved in the local community, anywhere people are doing that, this party is growing. It's really very, very simple. So I'm there. If you've got a growing area, bring those people along to these meetings in your region and we'll see what we can do to whip them up and enthuse them and turn them into fresh activists, the activists you need. I'm always available. Most of you I know have got my phone number or know someone who has. If you've got a meeting, if you've got something interesting going on, I can't come tomorrow in the way I used to be able to, but I will come. If you show some good reason, I can't anymore come to speak to a meeting of 7 or 8 people. As a general rule, I simply don't have the time. But if you can bring 3 or 4 of those 7 or 8 people to one of the regional meetings, then I'll be there. Or if they're doing something really special, then I will make the special effort and I'll make time somehow by hook or by crook. In any case, I'm always, wherever I am, I'm always in touch with the key people in the party and I'm always involved. And I'll carry on being always involved in that way. But I and we need other people. You know yourself from your own areas how hard it is when so much of the weight falls on your shoulders. Individually, I know some of you who bear a crushing burden of local work and how desperately we need fresh people so that we can expand. You all know that. And equally, because there's some people here who could do more. Again, you all know at some stage in your life there's something more you could do. And if you're one of the people who in fact is leaving the burden of the work to somebody else, step up and do a bit more. Or if you're already at the limit of what you can do, make an effort to find someone fresh and involve someone fresh. You know, that's what I do. We've had several fresh faces up here this weekend. That's because we go out hunting and looking for fresh faces and trying to bring them in, rather than just thinking, oh, that's someone new, that's interesting. Or even worse, that's someone new, might he take my job? Chance to be a fine thing. Get out of that habit. Get out of that habit. We're getting new people. We need them. We are getting them. I know that there's the question, well, you know, nationalism is divided. It's not really divided, you know. Active nationalism isn't divided because there's only one active nationalist party in this country, and that's the British National Party. There are inactive little nationalist grouplets, and there's UKIP, which is relatively active, although very, very old. Most of its activity involves Nigel Farage being sweet-treated by the BBC. But nevertheless, yeah, they are active, but they're not a nationalist party. If you're in the nationalist cause, there's only the British National Party, which is both nationalist and active. That's why we're in the only game in town. Not that there's others out there, but they're not playing. They're not on the pitch. They're sitting on the sidelines contemplating their navels, which in many cases aren't a particularly pretty sight. But we're moving back towards more and more active nationalist unity. It's going to be stepped up over the next few months. UKIP is obviously a serious threat, not to our activist base in terms of people joining them. Nobody does. No one's impressed. No one's fooled by UKIP. But in terms of people we otherwise might have recruited, new people, to an extent they cut off the source. And in terms of voters, the voters who think, I want to kick the Tories and the Labour Party and the Lib Dems, how do I do it? And 5-6 years ago it was, I know, yeah, BNP, and now they think they do it by voting UKIP. Yes, of course, it's a problem. It's only a temporary problem because they won't be there all the time. UKIP right now is in the middle of an undeclared, and more important, unreported civil war. If the media reported the chaos and the hatred that's going on within UKIP in the way that they did within the nationalist movement, our nationalist movement, five or 4 years ago, then the public would be thinking, God, what an appalling shambles that is. Because UKIP is a shambles of factionalism and hatreds. And as I say, it's an unreported civil war going on right at the minute. But the media give them a free ride in the way that if it was us, of course, they attack them. But I can tell you there's people in UKIP, especially people from the more traditionalist wing at present, who are absolutely sick of the way that their party is going. It wasn't exactly hardcore anyway, was it? But when it's being liberalised and softened and people hounded out because they're suspected of holding a view which might be somewhere near ours, because they're suspected of nationalist sympathies, instead of standing for free trade globalism, they're hounded out of that party. If they're suspected of wanting to go beyond saying no Roma immigration from Bulgaria and Romania, and let's address the problem of mass immigration per se into Britain, if they're even suspected of having a nationalist sympathy, they're being hounded out of UKIP right now. Some of those people don't belong with us, frankly. Some of them are rank reactionary Tories who simply want to screw ordinary people. They were with UKIP because the banks were harmed by the coming United States of Europe and its various regulations. We don't want, need, and we won't have people like that. But there's plenty of good people in UKIP or formerly in UKIP, more on the activist side, who are now finding they don't have a home. And if we're out being active and showing that we do things and we lead the way, some of those people will find their homes with us. And some of those people will be very welcome indeed, because some of them have got middle management talents of exactly the sort that we need. At the other end of the scale, there's the National Front. It's got some good people in it, you know, the National Front. It's got some people who left us because they actually weren't up to the work, and it's just an excuse, and to that extent it's a dustbin. It's also got people who left us for one reason or another. Sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's the political stuff, sometimes it was on principle. And they thought that, well, if they came to a meeting now, it would be full of people from all around the world. Well, we've got an Irishman here and he's extremely welcome, because many of us are Irish as well. But I don't see the flood of anti-white, race-hating ethnics that we were promised by Mr. Woolley of the Operation Black Vote and the Equalities Commission when he said we'll force them to change their constitution, then we'll destroy them. It didn't happen. They didn't break us. We're still here. We are still an ethno-nationalist party here for the benefit overwhelmingly of our people. Right? So we're still here. So those people are left out of fear. They can come back. And they'll be coming back because the NF has just been taken over by a bunch of absolute crazies, and the decent people in that have been sidelined, forced out, deprived of a political home. And I say to those people, come back. This is your political home. If you're a genuine nationalist who's genuinely prepared to do grassroots political work trying to help our people, you belong in the ranks of the British National Party, and I don't care where you've been in the last couple of years, as long as you come back and get back working with us, all our shoulders to the wheel, pushing in the same direction. The biggest number of people we lost over the last few years, as you know, were the disappointed. Not the people who've gone anywhere, just the ones who've done so much work to build it up in their own area, who then, when there appears to be trouble at the top, it appears to be just crazy stupidity, the ones who don't know which rumours to believe and so on, and they just go off because they think, well, I've got my own problems and the mortgage and the bills and the cost of fuel and the kids need taking to football and all the rest of it, so they drop out for a while. Some of those I know. I meet them as I go around the country. Some of those are coming back and returning, and most of all, like I say, anywhere where we've got people doing the work, we're bringing in new blood. Because not a day goes by when out there, a few thousand more of our people, something happens to them in their lives, or their kids' lives, or their auntie, or their grandma, or whatever, and they suddenly think, my God, this has got to stop. I've got to do something. Every day, somewhere or other, someone in the town that you work, one or two other people reach that tipping point, and they're ready, they're available to us, they want something different, they need something different, they need hope. That's our job. To give people hope. For that, we've got to be out there, as has been said throughout the weekend, being active. They're all welcome, all these people, whatever source they come from, providing they integrate to us as people on this very careful tightrope I talked about yesterday. This tightrope between, on the one hand, an impractical idealism, to put it nicely, or dogmatic extremism, to put it as a pejorative sense, and on the other hand, just unprincipled populism. Anything the public want, well, yeah, we'll give them that because we just want lots of support, like some kind of pseudo-nationalist Lib Dems. That is not what we're about, neither of those. Personally, I have a slight bias towards the idealism and the principle. If I've got to err on one side of the tightrope, I'd rather fall off on the side of idealism and principle. That's a reason that I invited Dr. Tomislav Sunic here to speak, because he's talking in very erudite, calm, logical terms about really quite hardcore nationalist philosophical beliefs. And I want this party to be based on that hardcore real nationalism. And to do that, we have to have all our people, all our key movers and shakers, you people and the people watching this, and watching, I'm sure, the videos which we've shot of Dr. Sunic speaking. I want people looking and thinking and understanding really what we're here to do and what we're all about. It's very, very important. It's really vital, whatever source someone comes from, whether they're fresh off the streets or whether they're from another party or whether they're recycled nationalists, it's really important that we all individually and collectively do what we can to ensure that we turn them into real nationalists who really understand our struggle and are committed to the long-term struggle. I spoke about unprincipled populism. The most popular form of unprincipled populism, the one which you have the most instinctive sympathy, the one which is based on the most reality, is the people out there who say all Muslims are ... fill in the blanks. Every kind of evil under the sun. And yet when I've spoken with Karen Downs, when I've spoken to plenty of other families whose lads have been beaten up by thugs in places like Oldham, Burnley, Blackburn, all over, you know. Yes, it makes me feel the same way. But you know what? We've been programmed and conditioned from the last 10 years by people trying to make us, the whole Western population, think simplistically, yep, all Muslims are terrorist scum, all Muslims have got to be dealt with. It's not true, you know. We're being forced down that road. The public is being forced down that road by people, the very same people who brought the Muslims here in these large numbers. They're trying to create this clash of civilizations where we are so eaten up with hatred, not of what's been done to our country, but of the people who've been used and abused to do it, by the ethnic minorities who've been used as tools. We're so eaten up with concern and anger about that. We're so eaten up, for instance, with concern, oh, they're having Sharia banking. What a terrible thing. Sharia banking, how awful it is. I'll tell you what, it's not as bad as the usurious, stinking, rotten, Western so-called banking system that dominates and has ruined this world up until now. I don't want Sharia banking, but let's not get fixated on stopping Sharia banking because the Bank of England as it sits now is lovely and gorgeous and it's a lovely cosy thing. We can leave it alone. No, we can't. We need to destroy the whole Western banking system and put something healthy in its place. Sharia isn't the answer, but it's not the problem in banking either. And let's never forget that. So we reject, as we've always had, any idea that Islam has any place in our country. No, it does not. This is a Christian, Western, democratic, traditionalist, white European nation where Islam doesn't fit. It never can. It can't fit with our core values. And for that matter, what's changed the balance of demographics in, say, Barking and Dagenham isn't Islam. It's Christian Nigerians. Let's not get fixated on Islam because it doesn't matter what they are. It's the fact that they don't belong here, they don't have roots here, and this is the most overcrowded country in the world, and we're losing control of our own country, and more than that, we're actually losing our own country and our own control of our own destiny, and our grandchildren will, unless things are turned round, grow up as a second-class minority in the land of their forefathers. And it doesn't matter what damn religion it is that's doing that, whether they have no religion or not. It's a question of ethnicity and culture far, far more than just religion. So I understand why people get particularly fixated about Islam, but it's not the core message, particularly when you understand that the really evil ones, like the monsters, the utter monsters who tortured defenceless captors to death in Kenya the other week, the ones who murdered Lee Rigby, that's a form of Islam which, yes, it has its roots in Islam's desert 7th century origins, but it's also a form of Islam which, if you turn it over and look at where it's made, the stamp on the bottom of the vase, it says made in the United States, made by the CIA, made by the Mossad. Those are the people who created that form of crazed Islam, because they have to have people around the world fighting against each other, because they have to have world wars, because world wars make profits. World wars make profits for the banks. They make profits for the big corporations. And when communism collapsed as a viable, visible enemy out there in Soviet Russia, they had to have a new enemy because they need an enemy to keep the masses happy. It's 1984 all over again. So we don't want alien religions, these people in our country, but we don't want war with them. We don't want hate with them. We don't want to interfere in their countries. We want to leave them to run their own countries as they want to do. That's their human right, just as it's our human right to run our country as we want to do. And we're not dealing fundamentally, in this case, say, with people in this country, we're talking about ethnographic blocks. But in the world as a whole, we haven't got a problem with Islam, we've got a problem with Wahhabism. It's a problem in this country because the Wahhabis are buying up with Saudi and Qatari and Kuwaiti oil money. They're buying up the infrastructure of this country, lock, stock and barrel. They virtually own this country from above, as the people from below, in the little back streets of towns in northern England and the Midlands and parts of London and so on, as they're buying up corner shop by corner shop, house by house by house, as they're growing from the bottom in terms of an Islamist uprising aimed at our civilization from these Wahhabi fanatics. And believe me, they are, because they're the ones who are pouring the money into the mosques and into the madrasas being built not just in Britain, not just in Ireland, but all over Western Europe. So they're applying this pressure from below to Islamise our society at the same time as pressure from above as they buy it up. But it's not any form of Islam, it's this Wahhabi extremism. I'll give you a parallel. Back in the old days of the Cold War, when myself and various people I know here were physically slugging it out with the Reds on the streets. Back in those days. And everyone thought in the 70s, everybody from the far left through to the far right and all commentators in between, we all thought and understood there was a serious chance of Western Europe falling to a communist dictatorship, piecemeal, bit by bit by bit, and all being subsumed in that horrible, monstrous, evil regime. At that point, we had a problem with communists, we had a problem with the USSR, we never, ever, ever had a problem with ordinary Russian people. They were slaves of the same system that was a threat to us. And similarly, we haven't got a problem with Arabs in their own countries, who are also slaves and oppressed by this brutal, wicked form of power politics which disguises itself as a version of their religion, Wahhabism. That is the real problem. I've run through that at some length to give you advance warning that from what I've learnt in Syria and the Lebanon, from what I've seen from people I've talked with, that rather than seeing all these people as one great block, we have to understand that the Shia and the Sunni hate each other. They hate each other even more than any foreigner who's grown up with a chip on their shoulder because of Western imperialism and so on, more than any of them hate us. They hate each other, and the Shia fear the Sunnis because a victory for the Sunnis in Europe would utterly tip the balance, so the Sunnis will then wipe the Shia off the face of this planet. Now, I don't want to see any significant number of Shia Muslims in this country. Again, they don't belong here. But it's not surprising they are here when, if they stay in their own countries as minority in places like Pakistan, they get slaughtered. And I hope that one day when we have a peace accord between the Middle East and the West, that there'll be some places, Syria could be one of them, where there can be places where Shia can go and live in Shia communities in absolute safety and practice their version of Islam in the way that they want to do it, and they don't have to do it in South Wales. I want to see that day. But to help us get to that day, I say to you this, that we are on such a knife edge of whether our civilization, our people even survive, that we cannot afford to turn away potential allies who may one day work with us. And quite simply, when you've got what you thought in the past was one huge monolithic block of every Muslim in the world, and you suddenly see, in fact, there's a huge difference, and that some of them actually look to us and think, well, thank God someone's trying to keep Western Europe from falling to the most extreme form of Sunni Islam, because if it does, we're absolutely screwed. Those people look at this party and they look at Western ethnic nationalism with a high regard. They look at us and they admire us for standing up for our people, and they see that in doing so, we're all also standing up against their enemy. I don't know where this will go. I'm merely flagging it up as a pointer. And if in due course you see us talking to some of these people, doesn't mean we've gone soft. It means we're thinking intelligently about how the hell we get out of this terrible mess that the Western European civilization is in when we are on the point of no return. That's what we're looking at. Because we're in the real world. And in the real world, our nations, our race are in the last chance saloon. I think you all know that, don't you? So when you're in that stage, you have to think about real serious politics. I've talked with Christians in the Lebanon who are saying, well, yes, we had our civil war and it was us against the Muslims and so on, but there's now Christians allied with Shia against the Sunnis and their Greater Israel Zionist extremist allies. Well, it stopped Christian communities in the Lebanon being wiped out. Quaderat demonstrandum, as it were. That's it. It's worth considering. As I say, we are in the last chance saloon. Having said which, so also are our enemies. We face an enormous system with enormous power. There's no question about it. But everywhere you look, this giant very clearly has feet of clay. Nobody believes their propaganda anymore. No one. The internet has blown apart what was previously an utter monopoly on information. They're struggling to control it. They may get control of it. I don't think they will. I think it's uncontrollable by its very nature. It's like the old days, going back hundreds of years, when a printing press was a very expensive thing, and other than that, you couldn't get written ideas across, and then someone invented the pen. And then someone invented the biro. And at that point, ordinary people can communicate. Not as effectively as if you own a big printing press, but you can communicate. And then the internet has revolutionised that even more. It's basically created a level playing field. And the elite's power isn't based, in the end, on money or arms or numbers. Certainly not numbers, because we outnumber them. The elite's power is based on its control of people's minds. And that's based on them having a control on the flow of information. And that's broken forever because of the internet. I'll tell you that now. It's a giant with feet of clay. Yes, it's got enormous economic wealth, but no, it hasn't. It's trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. Unrepayable debt. The whole economic system of the entire developed world is a basket case. It's something in the course of collapse. And it will collapse because there's loads and loads of oil and energy out there, but we've used all the good stuff, we've used all the easy stuff. What's left is going to be more expensive to get out, and because of that, there's less money to pile into the financial side of things. There's less money to keep people in what we've come to regard as a normal life. There's very hard times coming to the people of the world and the people of the Western world, and the banking system as it now stands is part of the problem, is part of what's causing those hard times, and it's effectively unreformable. They will come up with an attempt at a reform. I predict over the next few years you'll see people pushing for a debt-free money creation system in the hands of the World Bank. So what we've been saying about the international banking system and what's wrong with the banking system for decades as nationalists, many decades in fact, they'll turn around and they'll admit, yes, you were right all along, and actually, yeah, we can create money as an interest-free operation, but of course it's got to be done internationally. And actually the big debate will be, wait a minute, should it be done internationally? by unelected, faceless bureaucrats? We don't even know where they're from. Or should it be done in our country? And should the French say, we'll do it in our country? And the Americans say, we'll do it in our country? And the Chinese say, we'll do it in our country? And I believe at that stage that nationalism and democracy and the power of the masses will inevitably beat what the elite want, because it's so clearly very, very wrong. They really are nervous. I sit with these people in Parliament. We had a debate, the one where I had a right old go at them in the Labour committee over their outrageous proposals to take away the last shreds of free speech from the peoples of Europe. And the chairman of that, he said at one point, wherever we look all over Europe, go and look at the thing. He says words to the effect, wherever we look all over Europe, all this tolerance, everything we've spent so long building, it's all falling apart. Those are the words he used. It's all falling apart. That's a man in a very powerful position, in a very powerful government. It makes 80% plus of our laws. And he's saying that his vision of the world, he's a Spanish socialist, he's saying everything he's spent his life trying to build is, quote, falling apart, unquote. The whole thing is falling apart, and they're very nervous. Because they're nervous, they get angry, they lash out. That's what's happened in Greece. Someone was stabbed at a football match where the two sides have different political affiliations. And someone has come forward and said, yeah, I did it and I support Golden Dawn. We condemn political violence, absolutely. In fact, we condemn all violence, absolutely, except the small grandchildren. We condemn all violence, absolutely, and actually political violence in particular, because it's so dangerous and corrosive and it leads for a cycle of tit for tat. It's really bad news. But what's going on in Greece is the simple fact that on the word of someone saying, I support that party, there's now a witch hunt and attempt to destroy that party on the grounds that they've been involved in some kind of conspiracy to murder. When I was on Al Jazeera earlier on today, I was able to point out that there have been 4 or 5 political murders in Greece recently, where members of New Democracy, which is the ruling sort of right-wing Conservative party, have stabbed to death leftists, and leftists have stabbed to death members of the ruling right party. But there's no suggestion that therefore the socialists should be banned or the ruling right party should be banned because a member of theirs, in the case of one of them, the bodyguard of an MP, has stabbed a political opponent to death. No suggestion there. It's only when a nationalist party is theoretically involved do they use it as an excuse. And they're using it as an excuse because they're literally petrified to have seen Golden Dawn go from 0.7% of the vote to 7% of the vote to 14, 15, 20% of the opinion polls. And that's why they're doing it. That is how these elites operate. That is their opinion of democracy when push comes to shove. You can have democracy as long as you agree with them. That's the reality of it. Step outside that and it's different. Here in the northwest of England, just this weekend, 7 young men are spending their first week in prison. These are 7 young members of the Northwest Infidels. Several of them have past involvement with us. Several of them have never been involved with us. As a matter of fact, 1 or 2 of them we probably wouldn't want to be. But nevertheless, let's look at why they're in prison. Because they had a scuffle with some far leftists. About a minute, apparently, it was all over. No one was seriously hurt. People got a few bruises. Action, 7 young men now in prison. Now, I wouldn't mind people on the nationalist side being sent to prison for attacking political opponents, and I think probably they were more aggressive this time around, providing it was balanced. Because what have we seen in recent years in the Northwest? When we had Hazel and Peter Tierney beaten the hell out of in Liverpool town centre, and it was Peter ended up, it was the nationalist ended up being accused and dragged through the courts, and nothing happens to the far left at all. I think back to when I was first elected, and myself and Simon Darby and others were down on College Green, and we had a red mob 150 strong throwing bricks and bottles and darts at us, and the faces of the individuals who were doing these things were caught on CCTV, and the police arrested them, they knew who it was, and then the prosecution was fouled up, no charges were brought, and it's all dropped. So it's totally one-sided, and that's the problem. And either they need to recognise, or should recognise, that young men involved in politics get a bit carried away, and every now and again there's a bit of fisticuffs, and the cops should slap them around the ear and send them home. or everyone should be stamped on if they use any form of violence whatsoever in a political context. But not what we have in Britain, what you've had in Greece, where for months now, Golden Dawn's local offices have been bombed by the far left with the full support of huge sections of the political elite and the mass media, and that's absolutely fine. But then the other way around, bang. And of course, it's not about fairness, is it? It's about a wicked, corrupt political elite trying to stamp on its enemies, on the people it fears. And it's nationalism they fear. It's only nationalism they fear because they control all the rest. It's all phony. This left, right, within the system. We're the only ones who are different. We're the ones they fear. And they know their own system is so crumbling that this small number of people, and nationalism is only a small thing in terms of its organised fashion all over Western Europe, this small number of people have the capacity, because of the times that are coming, to revolutionise politics in a very short space of time. And they know that. And that is why Stephen Dumont, who's only 16, is in a youth prison today. Liam Pinkham, Peter Hawley, Shane Calvert, Matthew Coates, Michael Kearns and Nathan Smith. They're in prison because they're nationalists and they stood up for what they believe in. They're not members of this party. We don't approve of getting involved in tit-for-tat trouble with the left. Frankly, it's bloody stupid. It really is pointless. But this is injustice, what's been done to those young men, and we should stand by those young men while they're in prison. Now, you might think, well, is it really anything to do with us? Greece, well, they're Greeks, they're rather excitable, and the Northwest infidels, well, they're young and a bit hot-headed and so on, and the police aren't going to come for us. I don't think any of us believe that, do we? Because when we had the people stand up earlier on, who've had the police coming through your front door early in the morning, you already know, just because you're in the British National Party, you run that risk. And we're the ones who haven't allowed that to deter us. Many of those who walked away from this party and made excuses, oh, this was wrong, that was wrong. No, they don't want the police coming through their door at 6 in the morning. Actually, you can't really blame them. Except for the fact that generations of our ancestors have done far worse than that. 100 years ago next year, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of them went over the top in a dawn raid into the teeth of German machine guns. Now that's courage. That takes something unbelievably difficult to do. What we do is not difficult. It's not nice if the police take away your computer, because it will be knackered. But if you've been posting silly stuff on the internet, you had it coming anyway, you asked for it. And in any case, whatever reason it is, you can replace your computer. You can't replace your head when it's been blown off by a German shell. So really, we're not up against anything that's particularly frightening by the standards of our ancestors, by the standards of the boys and girls in Afghanistan right now. We're really not up against anything that bad. It shouldn't put us off. But don't think that basically, as long as we simply stick to putting out leaflets and standing in the town centre and doing that, they won't bother about us, because we haven't really done anything to them. That's what you might think. Why they come? What have we done to them? What have we done to them? What have we done to the British political elite? 10 years ago, no one discussed immigration in this country. It wasn't allowed to. There was a conspiracy of silence. Now they talk about it all the time. They outbid each other with worthless promises, at least offering people hope, at least confirming to people it's legitimate to feel this way, to think about it, to talk about it, and demand something is done. Why has that happened? Because of us. Because we made them. That's what we did to the political elite. We broke their cosy conspiracy of silence on immigration. In the last couple of years, they've arrested dozens, scores, coming now on for hundreds, of hardline, Wahhabist, punk, Muslim grooming gangs who've been abusing our girls and Sikh girls and black girls, the girls of any other community other than their own. They've been arresting them. Back in 2004, 2005, they arrested me for speaking about it. Now they're arresting them. Why are they arresting hundreds of young men from those communities? Because we made them do it. Because we forced it into the public's head. It's an issue. We're the only people talking about it. We're the only people doing something about it. So we forced them to do it. They've destabilised whole sections of Britain now. in ethnic relation terms. Because of that, they wouldn't have done it. They'd have taken the easy road. Those monsters would still be out there, every last one of them, noncing little girls right now, if we hadn't forced the establishment to act. We forced their hand. That's what we've done to them. When successively Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, David Cameron or George Osborne talk in one way or another about British jobs for British workers, it's not an accident. They don't believe in British jobs for British workers. They don't want British jobs for British workers, because British jobs for British workers automatically means some kind of restriction on the profits of large capitalist companies. Why do they talk about British jobs for British workers? Because we made them talk about that, because we were, and if they left it to us at a time of economic hardship and so on, our support would snowball. They didn't dare to do it. So that's why they had to at least talk about those things. And most of all, they spent a huge amount of effort winding the British public up, or trying to take us to war in Syria, as a stepping stone to war on Iran, as a stepping stone to the destruction of the entire Middle East, so it can be remade by the American neocons for their own benefit. They spent a fortune and invested an enormous amount of effort in that. And we stopped it. That's what we've done to them. We've walked into the middle of one of the most vicious, evil, but coordinated and well thought out plans to create major disruption, chaos and war in this world for the profits of the few. And we interfered and we stopped it. Now they want to carry on and do that again. They'll try it again. They'll be back. And they won't want us around to interfere again. So I'll tell you that the trouble we've had in the past from the police and the authorities, it's not going to get better. It's not going to go away. The troubles that various people in this room have had are going to visit themselves on you. I hope I'm not scaring you. I don't think I'm scaring you. I think you all know it anyway. And what the hell? Let them come, let them do it. Because it's not like going over the top in 1914 or 1915 or 16 or 17. 4 years of hell. 4 years of terror. Not just vaguely wondering if that bang at the door is the milkman or whether it's some cop with a submachine gun. He's not going to use it. The silly kid's 22, he's scared stiff. Doesn't matter. Get over it. Don't worry about it. But it is going to get worse for us. It is. And because it's going to get worse, we have to be realistic about these things. And in particular, something I want just briefly to float. There's no point waiting until the repression really strikes and then saying we've got to organise, we've got to do something about it. This is why you'll find on our website, I hope you've all read it, the document What to Do If You're Arrested. Can I have a show of hands? How many of you read that on the website? Okay, put it another way. How many haven't? Right, okay, for God's sake, people, get back and read that, because otherwise, if you do get lifted, you won't have the faintest idea what to do. It's as simple as that. Don't leave yourselves in that position. You've got a 5 or 6 times greater chance of being found guilty, of being sent to prison, of having your life torn apart if you haven't read that booklet than if you have read it. For God's sake, go back and read it. The same goes to everyone watching this. Not because we want confrontation with the state, not because we're turning to violence, because we are not, but because in their desperation, they will turn to violence and repression against us. And it's absolutely vital that everybody reads that and understands. The gist of it, the crux of it, the most important thing is summed up as whatever you say nothing. It's especially with Race Act things when what determines the conviction or otherwise is the state of your mind and what was likely. The moment you start trying to discuss and be reasonable with them and treating a trained police interrogator like an ordinary, decent, logical human being, they have you. And you are going to prison. Not for anything you've done, not even for anything bad that you've thought, but because how they will twist what you said and make it look as though you were thinking something bad, or that you just really didn't give a damn and you were being irresponsible. For the love of God, go back and read that booklet and spread it, because we are going to face these troubles. And what I want to float is the idea that rather than waiting until it's happened, we need pretty damn quick, and I'd like some of you to think about it, because the people at the top of the party, we are stretched to breaking point in terms of what we can do. We need other people to step forward and come up and help. We need a Nationalist Welfare Association which raises money, which helps people who are facing trial, which helps people who have been put into prison, primarily if they're members of this party, primarily if they've in some way been involved with this Nationalist Welfare Association, but even in fact if they're from another group, if they're genuine nationalists, if they're genuine British nationalists, in some way campaigning for the cause of our people and being persecuted wrongly, not for something bad they've done, but for something they've thought, for something they've said, for something legitimate they've done, then I don't think it should matter what party or group they are in at present, because we've got far more in common with those people than we have with people in the Labour Party, people who write The Guardian, people who work for the BBC, or even Joe Public out there who does sweet bugger all year after year after year. Every nationalist who's active in this country, in the end, when it comes to us against the state, is a brother or sister of ours, and we should stand by them, and we need a Nationalist Welfare Association to do it. I look forward to volunteers to come forward, and we'll discuss it, and let's take that idea, and let's get it organised so it's ready for when we need it, instead of trying to organise it from prison cells, because then it's too late. I hope to hear from you on that. And that's really it. As I say, don't think, what have we done to them? We've turned their political world upside down. This little band of peasant rebels, which is what we are. We forced them to U-turn, we forced them to talk about things, we've opened the whole things up, and we've stopped one of their wars. We've done a great deal of good for our cause and for the people of this country in recent years. We've got a lot more good to do for our country and the people of this country in the coming years. Let's get out there and do it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well done, all of you.